Hey, how you doing? I'm TIMOTHEVS. In today's video, I'll talk about a few common misconceptions about ancient Rome you can often encounter in movies, TV series, and even history books. Check it out.
Excuse me?
Oh yes, very good.
The first misconception I'd like to address concerns wine in ancient Rome. It's often said that Roman wine was much stronger than modern-day wine, which usually has an alcohol percentage of approximately 12%. There's two arguments that are often given to support this claim. The first one is that it was common practice to dilute wine with water before drinking it. Although this was in fact very common, we have no way of knowing the average alcohol percentage of neither the pure wine nor the diluted beverage. Using this as an argument for the claim that undiluted wine must have been much stronger than modern-day wine assumes that the ancient Romans would have wanted to drink a beverage that has a similar alcohol level to the wine we drink today. But there are simply no grounds for this. Compared to whiskey or tequila, 12 to 15% seems like it isn't all that much, but if you drink a beverage with this amount of alcohol all day, every day, the risk of getting too intoxicated to get anything done is quite high. The second argument is taken from Plinius Major. He says that Falernian wine would catch fire when a flame was held near. First of all, we're not sure that this was due to the amount of alcohol and not some other ingredient, but even if it was, the flash point of modern-day wine is only at about 52 degrees Celsius, so briefly heating the wine could have been enough to cause it to become flammable. The highest percentage of alcohol you can get by fermentation seems to be about 20%. Such wines have a flash point as low as 36 degrees Celsius, which must have been pretty easy to attain under the Italian summer sun. In any case, there's no evidence that the practice of distilling drinks to get a higher alcohol level was widespread in the Roman Empire, if it was even known at all.
The great forum of ancient Rome, completely recreated so that its original beauty may startle the modern world. The temple of Jupiter where the Caesars became gods.
A second misconception I'd like to mention is a very old one, but it can still be seen in many movies today. Many people still think that all Greek and Roman statues were virginal white, because that's what most marble statues from antiquity look like when they're excavated. Sculptors from the Renaissance period and the Neoclassical period were very fond of the pure appearance of white marble statues from antiquity, so they tried to copy this look when making their own statues. By doing so, they further spread the idea that marble statues are meant to be white. However, there is sufficient evidence that shows that many Greek and Roman statues were in fact not left white like the early modern and modern ones. Some, like the one shown on the left here, still have traces of the pigmentation that was applied to the marble, and others were made by fitting together several differently colored materials, like the one on the right here. Many people that are interested in antiquity have heard about colored statues by now, but we shouldn't be tempted to think that all statues were brightly colored either. Roman frescoes and mosaics, like the ones shown here, reveal that at least some statues were not that colorful at all. They seem to have been left unpainted, at least partially. Of course, another explanation would be that the depicted statues were already old enough for the coloring to have faded. Perhaps some Romans of the imperial period appreciated the weathered look of an antique Republican or Greek statue. Apart from painting statues or leaving them white, gilding them seems to have been fairly common as well. Of course, Roman statues made entirely out of metal were also common. Anyway, in the end, there also is a great variety in the appearance of statues of Catholic saints or Hindu deities, so why would this be any different for Roman statues? Many people think that the Romans basically adopted Greek polytheism and just changed the Greek names to Latin names, but reality is a lot more complex than that. First of all, both Greek and Roman polytheism most likely derive from Indo-European religion, so they have a common ancestor, so to speak, but they developed into distinct religions. Influenced by the gods of the Greek settlers of southern Italy, the vague native Italic spirits acquired more complex personalities and family ties, along with temples and statues in their honor. The Roman Neptunus, for example, originally was a spirit that dwelled in springs and freshwater streams, as the early Romans were not sea-oriented. But through association with the Greek Poseidon, he became a bearded man with a trident and horses who was the brother of Jupiter and Pluto, husband of Salacia and ruler of the seas. The Romans may have enriched their native religion with many Greek elements, but a number of typically Roman peculiarities remained or were invented later on. When it comes to the concrete religious rituals, for example, both the Greeks and the Romans made offerings of wine and incense and sacrificed animals to gain a certain deity's favor. But in general, the Romans covered their heads while praying, while the Greeks didn't. It was common in both cultures to eat the victim's meat after the sacrifice, but the Romans did not eat the entrails like the Greeks did. Instead, they burned them on the altar. And more importantly, some of the most prominent deities in Roman religion, especially during the imperial period, had no Greek counterpart. Let me just mention these three. It feels only natural to mention the two-headed Janus first in this list. This god of beginnings and gateways, after whom the month of January was named, had to be mentioned first in every prayer. As Janus was the gatekeeper of the gods, failing to mention him would keep your prayer from reaching them. The household gods called the Lares were also unknown to the pre-Roman Greeks. These deities were believed to protect the familia and, despite their humble status, received daily offerings in the household, which actually makes them among the most prominent deities in everyday life in ancient Rome. Another prominent set of sacred beings that did not receive religious attention in Greece prior to the Roman rule were the emperors. Many emperors were deified and enshrined in temples after they died. At some point, Roman citizens were even required to offer incense to the living emperor. Hollywood often depicts gladiators with random armor, but evidence indicates that the kinds of swords, helmets, shields, etc. were dependent on the type of gladiator. There was only a handful of popular types, and each type had a regulated set of weapons. I dedicated a few videos entirely to the 7 most popular types of gladiators, so if you'd like to learn more about that, check out the link in the description.
You may read those old Greek fools until blood runs from your eyes. You've been none the wiser.
I cannot agree. The Greek philosophers have much to teach us.
Well, here's a Greek philosopher for you.
Based on what one can see in Hollywood movies, one could be inclined to think that every slave in the Roman Empire was subject to constant physical and psychological abuse. But several sources indicate that mistreating slaves was frowned upon by at least a part of the free Roman population. Perhaps the treatment of slaves in ancient Rome can be compared to that of domesticated animals in today's society. Like slaves, most pets and farm animals are not free to go where they want and need to obey their master. Some pets are mistreated, but others are loved and cared for in a way that it's safe to assume they're quite happy. Apart from the character of the master, the purpose of the slave also would have played a role. Just like a chicken in a battery cage doesn't receive the same treatment as a lapdog, a common quarry slave or mine slave would not have received the same treatment as, say, a highly educated Greek slave who worked as a teacher for a wealthy young Roman. During the imperial period, the treatment of slaves gradually improved. In the course of the first 2 centuries of the Common Era, slaves acquired the right to take legal action when they were mistreated. Also, murdering a slave for no good reason became illegal. Throughout the Roman period, freeing a slave as a reward for good service was not uncommon, and in some cases, they even might have had better lives than some of the poorer freeborn Romans. A slave freed by a Roman citizen was granted some rights, like the right to vote, but he could not hold public office, nor could he become a priest. However, when a freedman fathered a son after his manumission, the son could acquire full citizenship, so the stigma of slavery was erased relatively quickly. Okay guys, that was it for this video. If you liked what you saw, please show your support by hitting the like button, sharing, and subscribing. If you want to see what sources I used for this video, check out my blog. And if you like to stay updated and get some extra pictures and links, you can like my Facebook page. That's facebook.com/TIMOTHEVS with a V instead of a U. The links are in the description below. This was TIMOTHEVS. Thanks for watching.